This year is Norman Manea's 75th birthday, and to celebrate that achievement, we thought to get together in his house on the Bard College campus and conduct a little conversation about his life, his wife, his work, his troubles, his thoughts, and his gift for mischief. I needn't say, not here, that Norman seems to many of us a great and permanent writer, but I here declare it. I turn to Norman for a first question. You were born, Norman, in the Book of Ina, and I wonder if you might begin by telling us a bit about this region, which produced a number of brilliant writers.
It's a landscape and also a psychological landscape, I would say, which is very dear to me. All those from that point, from that location, from that landscape started not only joy and happiness, but also a lot of trouble and a lot of suffering. It was for 70 years part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where the Romanian population, which was always a majority, had, I would say, a quite cordial relationship with the minorities. And the minorities were many. There were Poles and Ukrainians and Jews and Germans and Armenians. But what is remarkable from a political standpoint is that, for instance, the parliament had representations for all the minorities. This was not something very usual for that time in Romania, for instance, in the Romanian parliament. But it was not even in other parts of the world. The situation of the minorities was not excellent. So something of this atmosphere I inhaled myself before my deportation, and especially after. The region still had this old tradition, and I felt it when I was in the high school among my colleagues. And it was this very cordial atmosphere and a very friendly kind of dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question that you've just referred in passing to your time in the camp. And I think clearly we ought to speak a little bit about that. I mean, you were very young when you were deported with your family to the camp. And I wonder if you might speak about that experience. Do you remember the deportation itself?
Oh yes, this I do remember. I don't remember everything from that period, and I don't really have a clear chronology. I was 5 years old. My memory is related rather to the major instincts of life, and what was related to cold, to hunger, to fear, so the main memories are related to this type of feeling and very kind of urgency and uncertainty which you felt in this type of situation when you were suddenly taken out from a safe, sedentary, let's say, and happy, I would say, environment of my childhood before, and you are suddenly pushed into a kind of nightmare which you don't understand really at that age. You know only that it happened. At that time in Romania it was a government, very nationalist, military dictatorship, quite anti-Semitic. And the deportation, which started for us in October 1941, happened together with the entire Jewish population of the province. It was not the type of Auschwitz camp. There were not gas chambers, and it was not a clear kind of structure. It was chaotic, as everything Romanian was. But you could not go back, you could not move. The Romanian army was there, everywhere. You were put in a situation without solution, 2-3 families in a room, without any possibilities to earn money or to earn a life. So the toughest disaster happened in the first winter, these terrible Russian winters. My grandparents died that winter. What to say? I owe my life to my parents. They did everything for me and to save me. They were very different characters. After a few days there in this terrible misery, my father saw on his shirt, which was previously white and clean, so I saw a lot of lice, a lot of insects. And he said to my mother, look, it's not worth living. This is not a life to live. He was a very dignified man. My mother, which was much more neurotic than him, was a fighter. And she said, no, we have to fight. And if we fight and survive, you will have again a shirt which will be white and clean. We came back to Romania in 1945, and in April 1945, a month before the end of the war, and we were 1 year under the Soviets there, but not allowed to go back. It's a long story, complicated one. I called it the initiation. It was an important initiation in life, in all the aspects of life, in the corruption of daily life, in the corruption of ideals, in the corruption of friendship, of family, connections and feelings, of everything.
As you look back to this period, I wonder whether you had a vivid sense of your identity as a Jew, and was it clear to you during your years in the camp that it was as a Jew that you had been deported with your family?
Absolutely, but step by step. We were only among Jews. For the first time, I was listening to my grandparents and other people speaking Yiddish, and being a child, I took it in, as kids do very fast. Some were religious people, a lot were. My grandparents were very religious. My grandfather was a very religious man. My parents were not so religious. They were, I would say, rather traditional. I saw in the camps people who had a kind of faith in another power, in the fatality of sacred power. There were in the camps all type of Jews, as they are everywhere. There were communists, there were religious people, there were people who were not at all interested in politics, as my father was, for instance. And there were fighters, there were cowards, it was everything. The environment was totally Jewish, which meant, as usually when we speak about identity, that you fell in love with some things and you hated a lot other things, which were Jewish, which was some Jewish qualities, spirituality, faith, a way of helping each other. And on the other hand, it was hypocrisy, demagogy, whatever, name it, as human beings are.
Yeah.
It was a major, essential initiation in what life is.
Well, Norman, I thought I would ask you a little bit about your sense of yourself as an intellectual. You know, in the United States, many very good writers, and a great proportion of them would be very ill at ease, thinking of themselves as intellectuals. The word sounds in the United States, to many writers, a little pretentious and alien. My sense is that writers in other parts of the world don't have the same difficulty with that epithet, intellectual. And I wonder if I might ask you, when early or late in your evolution as a writer, you began to think of yourself as an intellectual. I can't help thinking of you that way.
Yeah, I myself, I'm aware of it. I don't dare to introduce myself as an intellectual. I was very hesitant many years to introduce myself as a writer even. I considered it a bit pompous and a kind of too much of self-awareness. I am probably an intellectual. From the point of view of a prose writer, it may be not the best thing to be, because the fiction writer should write from the guts, as you know, not from his head. But I very much admire writers who I think were also intellectuals. I would deviate for a second, saying that today died a writer whom I very much admired, Ernesto Sabato. He was 99 years old. In June 24, he would have been 100 years old. I considered him an intellectual, although he was a rebel starting at 16, but he studied physics and he was an intellectual. Anyway, I will take this definition in another way. A great Romanian critic, George Călinescu, said that an intellectual can be also a person who thinks as deep as Kant thinks. So it's not necessarily about your knowledge only, about your view, let's say broader, deeper view on culture and on the universe. It's about how deep you're thinking and how original and acute it is.
I jotted down, I've always sort of remembered it, and I just came upon it again just by chance the other day. It's from the American sociologist Daniel Bell, who just said of himself as an intellectual, I specialize in generalizations.
It's very good.
Isn't that good?
I knew him. I was even befriended with him. We were at the same conference in Mexico together. We had a very good time there. He was an extremely knowledgeable and interesting man. I would add that he knew a bit too much. He gave you the feeling that he knows everything. And it was overwhelming and irritating also. So he was certainly an intellectual.
But a dangerous thing.
It is, yes. It is. The problem with the intellectual is also in our time related to a very famous book published in France at a certain point by Julien Benda, which was about
the treason of the intellectuals.
Treason of intellectuals.
Yeah.
They didn't really fulfill their role, and their role should have been as the teacher of the nation, and they gave in to a lot of trivial daily dealings, ideological, and we know many writers and artists and intellectuals which were on the wrong side, if we may say so, although the right side is difficult to define, but they were on the crazy extreme communism, on the crazy extreme fascism. There are many examples in the culture of the world and in the Romanian also, probably less in the American, I don't know. So yes, for better or for worse, and this is how it should be emphasized.
Yeah, yeah.
For better or for worse, yes. I am an intellectual.
In all of our time together, many, many, many times, I've never...
We are old, Bob.
We are old and old friends, and I've never in all that time seen you in what I would call full fury. And yet I have a sense that...
Did you speak with Sheila about this?
I didn't. I very deliberately wanted to just rely on my own experience of you.
Yeah.
But I know intuitively that you have a capacity for rage. And I wanted to ask you, what inflames you? I can give you an example of something, but first I want to hear from you. What inflames you?
Look, my old friend, even older than you, Philip Roth, when he first wrote about me, he gave an example what appealed, what was appealing for him in one of my stories. And I was telling about a conference in Romania of writers where I participated. And because I was already in a difficult relationship with authorities, and I knew that there will be a lot of informants from the secret police, and I was absolutely decisive and firm that I will not speak. I will be there, but I will not speak, because I knew I am followed and I am watched. And at a certain point, I could not bear what was happening. This is what Philip liked. And I exploded. Why did I explode? Because it started, this was in a time when Romania was in a very difficult social political situation, as it is unfortunately quite often. And this discussion was very pretentious, aesthetical, and complicated, and nobody put the finger about the real problems which we had, not only as citizens, but as writers too. So I exploded, and I said wrong things, the hypocrisy, the demagogy, the rhetorical kind of cover-up. And this is usually, I was brought up in a family, in a usual, normal family, not very cultivated, not very wealthy, but it was a sense there of morality, very profound.
And the morality you seem to be referring to has to do with telling more or less what seems to be the truth without obfuscation.
Yes, and having a kind of compassion towards people around you.
Let me put another example to you, where I wasn't present to observe what I took to be the rage, but where we were apart and we went back and forth on email some years ago. A proposal was making the rounds in American academic life, a proposal whereby American academics would band together to prevent Israeli intellectuals, scholars, writers from being invited to American college and university campuses, specifically targeting Israeli scholars and writers. My sense and the tone in the exchange we had, coming from you certainly, was what I would call something like rage about
Absolutely. This was one outrageous example of the narrow-mindedness of some intellectuals, if we can call them this way, because to condemn an entire community, whatever the community is, Israeli, Muslim, whatever, Chinese, without making the difference between individuals, is a sign of, can we call this, non-intellectualism. Let's define first what it means, a democratic state. In my opinion, it means to have free election, to have free press, and to have a judiciary system which is independent. It never means a perfect state. Is America a perfect state? No. Democracy is by definition imperfect. Only dictatorship is perfect, as we know. So we have to discuss this in these terms. What do I like in America? You will be surprised. I like its incoherence. It's a sign of freedom of thinking, of freedom of speech, and of democracy. And we look to this diversity and incoherence as the best result of democracy. It's not a perfect democracy. As I said, perfection is only in paradise, and it's not on earth. Everything which is here is done by us, by people, and we first have to recognize that we are imperfect, and that all human beings are imperfect, and all these extraordinary projects, utopian projects, which are very much references to totalitarian states, because they're from utopia to terror. It was a very small step, but all had a utopian project. Communism, that the entire world will be perfect. Nazism, that the Germans will dominate the world as a superior race, and it will be another paradise governed by the Germans, and so on. And the Islamic fanatics of today, who want a religious, perfect, coherent state, is also the same utopian, which we know and we see goes one step to terror.
Did you have a sense when you were writing your fiction, particularly early on, in your first books, that there were particular writer models, influences that you could comfortably draw upon and still develop your own voice as a writer? I mean, was for example, was the figure of Kafka very sort of large, or the shadow of Kafka very large on the page for you early on?
You know very well that every writer is first a reader.
Yeah.
And some of them remain even readers.
Mm-hmm.
That's my case. So there are a lot, of course, influences, and it's difficult to detect exactly what kind of influence and where and how. But you are put in the end or at a certain point in a certain family of writers because of your style, because of your topic, because of your sensitivity. So I was also put in a certain family of writers, mainly Central European writers, Musil, Kafka, Schulz, others. In order to simplify, because I learned in America to simplify as much as it doesn't help me a lot, because I don't simplify enough, I think that in normal conditions, and with another biography, I would have been a Proustian type of writer.
Mm-hmm. That sounds right.
With my biography, I became more of a Kafkaesque
Mm-hmm.
kind of writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
The absurd of life, the grotesque and cruel side of life, of my life, of biography, of life around me, entered into my prose, and this put me closer to him, to his melancholy, to his sadness,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to his powerless despair,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so on.
That those words lead me to ask you a question, and that has to do with your period of breakdown. I only ask you this question again because you bring it yourself into the Hooligan, not at great length, but you know you speak of your own inclination to melancholy and your sense of darkness.
Depression, which came from the situation and from the temper, from this combination of genes and of reality, of course pushed me sometime to kind of, as I called it a minute ago, powerless despair in Kafka's case.
Yes.
Where I needed discussions with a doctor or a kind of help. And this was helpful as much as it can be. I don't think it helped a lot. But the American approach, again, because I'm here for 20 years, to chemotherapy is more drastic and more direct, and probably it's better.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
The doctor gives you the pill. He doesn't find immediately the right one, but after a while he finds. And suddenly you have the key to your so-called identity.
Mm-hmm. There's one little quotation that I thought I'd read to you that you include in this. Here are the lines from Celan. Blind. We are blind men and travel alone. Here no one can be the other's companion.
I feel close to Celan because of his Bukovinian roots, because of his deep, I would say too deep relationship with the Holocaust, where he was not a victim. He was not in the camps. He escaped. and he all his life was burdened by the guilt that he left his parents, and especially his mother, who were taken to these camps in Transnistria where I was also, and where they died. But the Holocaust became a deep, deep obsession for him. I'm close to him for all these reasons. I'm close to him because he finally ended up in exile, as it happened with me too. I tried not only to encode the writing and to close it in almost, so that the access needs a special effort and a special persistence. But what does this tendency express? What does this tell us? In his case, in my case, in other cases which are perhaps similar. It's a wish or perhaps a urgency to put a screen, I don't know if you say blind screen, I mean opaque, an opaque screen
is good.
between you and the world. In the case of me, in 1970, this novel appeared in Romania. It was this little period, not so little, but it was a period of opening. This was a signal of my total estrangement from the outside society. As if you close the door and you want to stay inside the door. In fact, this last novel, which just appeared, which is called The Layer, has this notion, has this metaphor of the book as a refuge, as a bunker in which you hide against the exterior chaos.
I should ask you when the key to all of your problems came into view in the person of Cella. At what point did Cella enter your life and change it?
Whatever the point would have been, it's an essential point. She doesn't like me to speak about her, and she doesn't like me to ignore her. So I'm in a very complicated position, but certainly we have a long way together. In a marriage which lasted, and I must tell you not only that a lot of marriages are not lasting, but a lot of marriages in exile are exploding immediately. We have a very deep connection, and I think our connection is the connection of two people who feel very close to each other, who discover in time that they in fact were brother and sisters who would have liked to marry each other. In the case of a marriage which started from infatuation, and it was our case, and we go together to all these realistic and real, quite trivial and sometimes difficult moments of life. If this bond proves strong enough, you have a reason not only to be grateful, but to praise this type of contract which usually is not very praisable, as any contact is. So I can speak more, but she will be upset if I say too nice things about her.
I thought to ask you about the move to the United States. And what was that like? You finally made the decision when you first came. What was your experience?
I'm here already for 22 years. So how long is our interview?
Oh, at least
It's
15 years maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I can tell you from a long life already that you never know when the good things become bad and when the bad decisions prove to be very good. So in this case, I did not want, first of all, to leave Romania because I was very much rooted in the Romanian culture. I was not hunting after happiness, as I told you, or even prosperity. But the situation became there impossible at a certain point. I lived in Berlin, in West Berlin. I had a grant there for a year and a half. And then I wanted very much, I could not go back because of the political situation and of my personal situation. Although my old parents were there and my mother, who always wanted to leave, is in the end buried there. And I am out, who I didn't want to leave. So I was almost certain that I don't want to go to America. I felt it's a too big change for me. It's a too vital country for me. It's a too optimistic country for me. It's a too pragmatic country for me. And at that age, you don't make such crazy important decisions to go to a new world. At least in Europe, it was more or less more familiar, more similar, also from a linguistical point of view. I didn't have any English. But destiny pushed me here. I was not very happy. I was very afraid, very tense. America again proved to do what other states don't do. They gave me a grant here, a Fulbright. I was at the Catholic University for a year. I wrote in my book, The Black Envelope, about an association of deaf mutes, if you remember.
I do.
It was a kind of metaphor of the totalitarian society. But suddenly I became here deaf mute. I didn't have the language. I didn't understand in the subway what was. I think you also don't understand what they say in the subway about the stations and how they say it. But I was totally lost. So
did you go to language classes?
We went both to a class for immigrants in Washington, where we had very interesting colleagues, old Chinese ladies, young Brazilian guys. The entire planet was here. Step by step, it proved that, as Philip said in our first meeting, contradicting me, because he asked me what I wish here. I said I am dreaming about a hole where I can hide. He said, no, this you will not find here. This I can assure you, it's not the right place for this. And year by year, step by step, the situation improved. I got a key. I got some, as you know, some prizes here, some friends, some admirers. I said in my book, The Hooligan's Return, that America is the best hotel. I didn't say that it's the best place in the world, but I said it's a good hotel because more or less everything works. And I referred here to a saying by Philip, which is not more true, because he knew at least Czechoslovakia, but also a bit Eastern Europe, and he said there nothing works and everything matters. And here everything works and nothing matters. Now I think it's not more true. It's not true that everything works. It's true that nothing matters. So I can speak about America and about my initiation, step by step, in the American habits, in the American society, with a lot of criticism and a lot of admiration. I must say that although I would have been better off in Europe, but I was lucky to come to the place where I did not want to come. I remember when I came to Bad, I told Leon, because we had the first
meeting. This is President Botstein.
President Botstein. I said, look, he said, look, we will give you a grant and a teaching job for a year. And I said, I don't know English enough. I cannot do this. He said, forget it, you will do it. Einstein didn't know English, and he did it very well. I said, Einstein knew mathematics and physics. I have to teach literature here, it's very different. Said, no, you are able, you will do it, it's fine. So this is how I went to these phases. We lived, Cella found a job in New York, and we moved from Washington to New York. So I lived in a very small house. Irma Brandeis' house, she built a small, very small house, and she left it after her death to the college. As I said, some people call it the Unabomber's house because it was almost invisible and very small, but I was happy there, and I am happy in this bigger one. I called it Casa Minima. Now it's Maxima, and it's a very pleasant place now. I'm very happy there. It's also, as you see, quiet and pleasant, so the afterlife will also be quiet and pleasant.
Another kind of paradise.
I have a place here. Finally I will have a possibility, I think, to speak with my predecessors at Bad, whom I didn't meet, Irma Brandeis, Hannah Arendt and her husband. So this is a place where a lot of people from Bad rest and will rest. It expresses, I also think, the spirit of the college.
Yeah, I think you're right.
This is Leon's cathedral. Leon is president of our college. He was the youngest president in the United States. He came at Bad at 75. They are almost 40 years. He is a Renaissance man, a great creative spirit, and we should all be very grateful for what he did.
In The Hooligan, your memoir, you very wonderfully refer to this country as paradise.
Yeah, look around. It's paradise. But don't look deeper. I quote in my Hooligan's Return a verse by the Polish poet Zbigniew Herbert. And he says, in paradise it's better than anywhere else. It's true, but paradise is not for the earth, for our earthly daily life. It's a dream, it's a utopia, it's a kind of unreachable project. But the first impression in America and the impression now, after 20 years from this point of view, it's almost the same. It's paradisical here. because you hear here speaking all the time about the American dream. At the same time, one of the slogans which you hear very often is "We are the best." And the people who say this don't know a lot what the others are. There are these cliches. If you go beyond this superficial appearance, life is life here with all its problems. It's a very hard-working country. It has a lot of negative contrast and aspects. It still has a great dream and reality of freedom of speech, liberty, diversity, incoherence, as I said. We are in paradise, where we brought all our problems, all our trouble, all the entire biography with all its mixture of good and bad and happiness and unhappiness and dreams and adventures and even our modest creativity. So it's, I would say, even our story is worth to listening to it. It's very old. It is estimated at 350 plus years old. And it has lived through drought, fire, and being struck by lightning. It is truly a survivor, like me and a lot of other people. We are all survivors.
Is it older than you?
A bit. Therefore, I respect it. And it is also very wounded, as you see here. An impressive wound of time in this tree. So, you have it. You have everything. Il faut aller.